Hi, I'm Vic R here at CIO Summit with Duncan Brown. Duncan, great to meet you. And of course, we're in an incredible era of technology right now with the AI era looming. What key trends would you highlight?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the AI era. I think the big trend is not AI, it's AI everywhere. And so we're having conversations with our CIOs and CISOs in terms of them building AI into every process that their business is involved in. And whether that's internal or external, customer facing, it's massive. So the impact is huge. New drop-in research from IDC this week. The economic impact of AI is going to reach almost 20 trillion by 2030. It's an enormous amount, 3.5% of GDP, global GDP. So the impact is going to be enormous. It's going to touch every aspect of our lives, both business and personal. So that's the big trend. Big challenge, of course, is integrating all of that, getting the data where it needs to be, getting the process of governance around that. So there's a lot of work and heavy lifting to do that, but it's pervasive. It's going to affect all of us in every aspect of our lives.
Oh, it's an extraordinary figure that you mentioned there, but you're actually here talking about cybersecurity at the CIO Summit. So what key trends, what key technologies are you and your research team seeing in that key area?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about AI. AI is impacting all aspects of security as well. So AI is clearly a threat to security. We've seen deep fakes and voice spoofing and really quite nefarious, nasty uses of AI as a threat. But lots of organizations are now using AI to defend their organizations. So trying to be predictive about what threats are coming, using AI to be more efficient in their just in their processes. So in security operations, seeing a lot of that. So AI, again, AI everywhere, both negative and positive aspects of that in security. So that's one big thing. Second thing is we're seeing a lot of regulation. We've had GDPR, so we kind of know the playbook for regulation, but we've got DORA at an EU level. There's also UK-based legislation. And that's just got a relentless increase in the regulatory environment that organizations are needing to cope with. I think that's generally a positive thing for security. It gives us a framework in which to operate, and it also gets the board's attention. Most boards like to be compliant with regulation, and that helps to drive interest and activity, and dare I say also budget for the security operation. So I think regulation is generally a positive aspect. AI got regulation. The third big trend in security is the evolving role of the CISO or the security leader themselves. We're seeing that much less of a technology role and much more of a business enabler role. Of course, that places new demands and new criteria for the people that hold that role. It's no longer enough just to be a technical expert. You've got to be a business expert as well and be able to communicate levels of risk in terms that the board can understand and then act upon. So that board communication is a key aspect as well. So I think these are the main kind of big, heavy trends that are moving in security.
Yeah, really interesting, Duncan. I'm sure that's going to be a great session. Now, of course, generative AI is very much the talk of the town in technology right now. You alluded to it in your earlier answers. Are there some key lessons that we are being able to learn as this technology starts to bed in?
Yeah. So, as I said, the big opportunity there, almost $20 trillion of economic impact by 2030. So that's a long-term trend. The short-term trend is converting all of the experimentation in Gen AI into real-life deployable production systems. So we did some research this year. On average, this is an average figure, we have 40 proofs of concept per organization going. So the huge amount of experimentation, but only of those 40, 5 make it to production. So that's a 1 in 8 conversion from experiment to live production. So we need to improve that figure. Now I think there'll be less experimentation, so that number of 40 will come down. But we need that number 5 to go up. So I think we're just learning. So it just gives you an indication of the skill levels, the awareness, the preparedness of an organization, not just within its IT operation, but in the businesses areas as well, to be able to consume generative AI in areas that are meaningful. So there's a lot of work being done to identify the key use cases, or sometimes the collection of individual smaller use cases into a collective, like a super use case that is actually going to move the needle in terms of either internal productivity and efficiency, or hopefully actually driving revenue or better external operations, or externally facing operations, customer facing or revenue generating. So that's the point at which we're at the moment. So a lot of experimentation. How do we move organizations from that experimentation to actually extracting real value out of Gen AI? That's the big challenge that we're all facing today. We expect a tipping point happening in the next 12 months of experimentation and the scramble to much more of a pivot towards that business value. But that's the point that we're at now.
Fascinating times ahead. Well, of course, CIOs are doing more than just Gen AI. They're interested in data strategy, edge computing, cloud transformation, evolution. So are you seeing some interesting trends and developments in those areas?
Yeah. So I think we've been through the trend of centralizing data and workloads and infrastructure towards the cloud. I mean, not everyone is to the cloud, but I think we're over the hump in terms of deployment there. What's interesting is that having got there, we now realize that maybe that's not the best architecture for all of our applications. So there's much more an emphasis on what workloads we need and placing them in the right environment. If that's at the edge, then that's where they should be. So it's not just cloud by default, we're having a more nuanced workload-based approach, and that means both the actual process and the data being where it needs to be. Of course, the more distributed you are, then that places new demands on management and coordination. If you're distributing your data, that might be good for operations and efficiency and latency, but then you've distributed your data, you need to manage that. So so these things go in waves. So I think more organizations are becoming more, as I say, more nuanced in terms of locating those workloads and the data. But then the challenge becomes orchestrating those workloads. So that's kind of where we're at. There's another interesting couple of dimensions. One is sovereignty. So in the early days of cloud, we were told, well, it's a cloud. It don't need to matter physically where that is. That's why we call it the cloud. Yeah. Well, it turns out you do need to know where the data and your workloads are, because there are regulatory concerns. There are also just organizational sovereignty concerns, that we need to know where our data is for resiliency and for business continuity reasons. So organizations are much more sophisticated now about the need to know where all of their workloads and data are. So that's the broader discussion of sovereignty is one that's really only emerged in the last 12 or 18 months. And I think the other dimension is sustainability, because if we're putting all our workloads and data in the cloud, then we need transparency in terms of what is the sustainable footprint, the carbon footprint of those workloads. And we need much more transparency on that. So we're asking much more detailed questions of our cloud providers. And obviously when we start distributing workloads and data to the edge, then again, we need to maintain those levels of transparency. So a lot's happening in the infrastructure world. It's certainly not boring.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing your insights. Looking forward to hearing your session. Thanks again, Duncan.